And let's do the 4 limitless contemplations. May all beings have happiness and create the causes of happiness. May they all be free from suffering and creating the causes of suffering. May they find that noble happiness which can never be tainted by suffering. May they attain universal, impartial compassion, free of worldly bias towards friends and enemies. Sem jen kamje dewa tang dewe ju tang den pa ju chik dungal tang dungal chichu tang tra waju chik dungal mepe dewa tampa tang mindra waju chik nering chak tang ni tang tra we tang nom chempo la ne pa ju chik. So everybody, tonight, just let me take half of that off. We're going to do a little series on understanding the depth of the causes and conditions of our relative daily lives. And for all of this, I'm sure that a lot of people that can't be here because of the load shedding will actually catch up on the recording, I hope, so that we can just carry on, because I think it's such a deep subject matter, but it really requires a lot of talking and a lot of debating. Okay, it's important because, as I said to everyone yesterday, I want this to be practically applied. So if you make your statements brief and to the point, you can butt in at any time, because I think it's really, really important to understand this topic of causes and conditions and what it really, really means in our lives. It's a very important, very, very important topic. And it comes together with karma, but I'm going a little bit deeper than just the regular karma with this. So I want to start off. Yesterday, I was telling them about this beautiful YouTube debating between Dzongsa Khyentse Rinpoche and Master Jet Li, who was a Kung Fu martial art expert. And they have a lot of debates together. And I've really enjoyed watching them on YouTube. You can also. And the Master Jet Li, he came from a very poverty-stricken family. And they sent him to do martial arts. And he really excelled, because these families sent people to do martial arts because that was the best way that they could get money and sponsorship for their family. And he did exceptionally well. And then he became a film star. And then he starred in many things. He broke 1 million bones. He nearly died. How many times, I don't know. But now he was in conversation with this beautiful Rinpoche. And one of the people in the audience, one of the Chinese in the audience who really respects him and everything, said, I don't understand. Can you explain to us, why did you become a Buddhist? Now, it was very interesting because he told the story that, that about his own fame and path to fame and how he made a lot of money and how he then married and everything. But he said, I thought and read about the Buddha, he said, who was born with everything, good looks, fame, as he was a prince and he would be the king of the whole land, wealth, food, pomp, every circumstance and condition that everybody would wish for. He says, yet this part of the story that struck me was he chose to give that all up to find the truth. And he said, I came from poverty. I worked many hours, mainly in the beginning, to try and alleviate the poverty of myself and my family. And he said, I succeeded and then got the film contracts and the fame and the money. He said, but I kept thinking, why did the Buddha give this all up in his quest? So I thought, I will also begin the same quest. I will find out what he found out. And that was why I went into Buddhism as well as the martial arts. And I thought it was a very, very important story to start the causes and conditions on, because not a story, a real true thing. He didn't have to give up what he'd achieved, but all along, with all the conditions of his life, he really knew that there was much, much, much more to life than just those external circumstances. So that's my first little story. The second little story, I might have told you before, but I think it's a wonderful story, and I think it really is important, this particular story. So Chagdul Tulku tells a story that illustrates so much about his own sister, the very remarkable yogini Chinle Wangmo, and recounts an incident that occurred during the Chinese invasion. As she was riding her horse along the road, she was seized and brutally beaten by the highest Chinese official in the region. He used as his weapon the thick branch of a thorn tree. She was not angry as he beat her, for she recognized the beating as karmic purification. But in that tumultuous moment, she made a prayer that by her suffering, other people could be spared. Chagdul Tulku continues the story, illustrating the extraordinary impact that reversing one's usual attitude can have, of suffering can have. When he thought he had beaten her to the brink of death, the official let her fall to the ground. To his amazement, she remounted her horse, and with a wild, triumphant yell that compass emit, she galloped away. The official jumped on his own horse and overtook her. He was amazed to see that all her wounds had already healed. He invited her to stay at his home, and the next morning he gave her 600 yuan before sending her on her way. And he said to her as she left, "Please, will you pray for me when I die?" Anyway, the karmic link that Tinle Wangmo had forged with the Chinese official by her actions was evidently a very strong one. As it happened, the Chinese government officials later summoned her to the regional capital, and upon arrival, as she was walking to their offices, she passed a funeral procession. "Who is that?" she asked. "That is the governor of this region who just died," she was told. Tinle Wangpo began to pray, happy to be able to fulfill his request. Now, I think that is a really, really beautiful story of how we could all be in the causes and conditions of our lives. But I think that it's a very difficult thing. Hello, Lindiwe, it's nice you're back. But it's a very difficult thing to actually do because of our human thing that gets in the way all the time. So I want to read you Guru Rinpoche's quotes on causes and conditions that were given by Taisitu Rinpoche. He gave these causes and conditions very, very clearly. And this is what he said using Guru Rinpoche's verses, and tonight being a very auspicious night because it is Guru Rinpoche's day. This is what Guru Rinpoche said. When causes and conditions manifest, the plants will blossom. When everything is inwardly done, and listen carefully, when everything is inwardly done, it's time to manifest outwardly. Guru Rinpoche, said Taisitu, manifested as a person, and then everything happened as it should at the right time. Also for us, he asks the question, does anything happen to us that's not supposed to be happening to us? And he answers with a big exclamation mark, no. For us, the right thing will happen when all the causes and conditions are there. Just by not wanting, they won't disappear. Just by wanting, they won't appear. Only when all the inner circumstances are right. Now, this is the key, and we can debate it during these next 2 sessions or so. it's really, really, really important that we look at this very, very carefully, because most people think that as you can manipulate all the causes, as you work hard for this, for this, for this, for this, for this, it'll then manifest. Hello, Kath. But that's not correct, because when the inner conditions are right, and how do we get the inner conditions right? That is what I want to give right through this year, because don't worry, Kat, because if you get the inner conditions right, that's what Guru Rinpoche is saying, the outer will come, but the outer will never manifest unless the inner conditions are right. And we'll talk about this in great detail. Then there's another quote that Guru Rinpoche gave to his disciple Yeshe Tsogyal, and this is what he said, and listen very carefully. Appearances of the ground of our being. So what comes out of the ground of our being, plus and the path, these share a single essence that is not burdened by circumstances or moved by causes. Now let's just read that again so you can all listen. Appearances of the ground of our being and the path where we're going to purify any appearances, these are the same. They share a single essence. And that single essence is not burdened by circumstances or moved by causes. Now, if that is so, then why are we in the doldrums? And Kath, I was saying, I want lots of debate, lots of discussion, because it's so important, this. And then he gave a further instruction that Guru Rinpoche gave to Yeshe Tsogyal, and it went like this. Mind, which is your projector, and appearances, what you see around you, are not two separate things. We think they are, but they're not. For the nature of mind, that's your true self, clinging onto things, is a temporary condition whose expression creates the impression of things outside of yourself. If temporary dualistic mind is purified, then appearances are purified. So basically what he's saying is, we cling onto everything, not realizing what I started off with. When the causes and conditions are ready, the things will manifest. You have to set up the causes and conditions internally. And when they are set up internally, there's no difference between you and appearance. They're all one thing that is no longer burdened by causes and conditions. Now, I know that this sounds extremely difficult. It really does sound extremely difficult, but it's actually extremely simple. Why? Because the universal laws are very simple. They're not complex. The dualistic mind makes everything complex, but actually they're not. They're very simple. If the conditions are here inside, the conditions will be there. Even if you go through a whole lifetime without what you want, you will be purifying your conditions. You will eventually get those outer circumstances. And the last story I want to give you before we go is, there was a beautiful story. Manly Hall, who wrote the book, was in Japan in 1923 after the great earthquake. For the survivors, life went on, while with quiet patience they buried the dead and erected little altars on the corner of each block to offer prayers. Manly Hall's first rickshaw man in Yokohama had lost his parents, his wife, and his children in the earthquake. When they passed the altar on the street that they died, He asked Manly Hall, would you be inconvenienced if I paused for a moment and offered a silent prayer for their repose? He was a simple man, but had learned some English. This is Manly Hall, inquired discreetly how he had sustained his courage through this terrible ordeal. He replied, with calmness and complete conviction, the universe is just, and all its laws are good and kind. What we have created comes upon us. We cannot question a wisdom that is beyond our simple understanding. And that's a very beautiful story. So just to give you a couple of things, and I'll throw it open. I want to also give you Taisitu's things. This topic actually evolved from last year's teaching that we were having. And I had decided, I wrote it down because we always talk about cause and effect, karma's cause and effect, but we often leave out the conditions, part of the cause and effect. But conditions are the vital part for cause and effect or karma to play out. So if you plant an apple tree seed, it will produce apples, but without the conditions, the right soil, the water, the sunshine, the person tending the tree, and even the inner motivation to have a beautiful apple tree, there will be no apples and no apple tree. Now ponder that, so easy to think about. Similarly, a rainbow can never appear if one of the conditions it requires are not present. Conditions are as important as causes, but we tend to forget about them and focus on causes. And I cannot tell you how many people say to me, but Melanie, I've been trying so hard with this, and I've tried to have the right motivation, and it just doesn't come into being. And I often say, it's so important to have patience because you can't judge, you can't see what it really is about. There may just be one tiny condition that has to happen, or there may be a whole lifetime of a condition that has to happen before what you really want to achieve is achieved. We don't know. Why? Because we haven't yet got that omniscient mind. And so many people try and set causes into being virtuous, helping others, being generous, and it seems as if their labors don't bring fruits for a very long time. And that's because the conditions are not yet right. We can try and create conditions, but there are very, very subtle ones that are not quite there. So karma is not a straightforward thing. I've done lots of lectures on karma, and there are a lot of people going to be listening to this talk, and just, you can go back to all my karmic things. This is not about karma. It is about karma, but I'm taking the Dalai Lama's teaching, and I'm taking a very profound teaching from called the Circle of the Sun. And I'm going to give you both of these teachings, looking at all the causes and conditions. And it's a very fascinating, whole different way of really looking at all of this. But Taisitu Rinpoche wrote something which was really profound. And this is what he wrote. He said, the essence of Dharma is the essence of Dharma. Okay, that might sound like, what a statement. It's so important. Because with our minds, we think the essence of Dharma is this, and this. But he's actually saying the essence of Dharma is the essence of Dharma, full stop. He says, we are not believers of karma ultimately. We are believers of karma relatively. As long as we perceive everything in a dualistic way, then everything is karma. Every single little thing. So with our little human minds that think you are different to me, black is different to white. Today is different to yesterday. All our duality, things are outside me or inside me. For all those believers, okay, every single thing is karma. Once you go beyond that belief to the ultimate mind, none of that exists, but everything is karma. And he says, some things we can call karma and some things not because of the magnitude. But in principle, everything is karma on a relative level. There's nothing that isn't karma. However many strands of hair you have on your head, each one of them, he says, is the result of millions of karmas. For example, he says, it's said in the text very clearly that each of the feathers of a peacock, each strand of hair has perfect alignment of color. And each one of those little hair particles is the result of countless karmas. And trying to find karma, trying to identify karma, he says, is described as more difficult than trying to find the traces of a bird that flew in the sky for millions of years. The bird would have flown that way, and then that way, and then another way, and then another. He says, so to try and find all those traces is absolutely impossible. So he says, like that, you have to be omniscient to realize karma. Very interesting. You have to be omniscient. In other words, what we think is karma, you punch someone and they punch you back, tit for tat. I'll do this. I'll plant an apple tree and I'll get apples. That's totally simplistic for this dualistic mind, because every single condition has intricate rewoven karma. And he says, so we only believe in karma relatively. Ultimately, we've really got to get rid of it. We've got to go beyond it. It's really important. And when we go through terrible hardships and don't understand, because basically people say to me, but Melanie, I'm okay, I've done lots of bad things, but I'm basically a good person. So how come I'm going through all of this? Okay, that's very understandable when people say that. But you see, the complexity of causes and condition goes over eons of period. You can't tell. You can't tell when things don't change for you. And you can't stop putting in what you have to and putting in what you have to do here. Because unless this is a mirror for that, it's not going to happen. And if it does happen, it's going to be a very quick fix and it won't last very long. So what am I saying tonight? I'm saying the main meaning is to look on the other side of the river that we are busy crossing. Because when we cross the river, we leave the causes and conditions behind. But while we're still here, we truly need to look at the causes and conditions. And only when you want to take a leap over to the other side can you. So I don't know if anybody wants to comment or say on all the things that I said up to now. Please do. Is that your granddaughter? Too gorgeous, Linda. Anybody want to say anything?
Can I ask a question?
Of course, Tat.
You're talking about conditions and causes. Is the cause that you're talking about the cause that we talk about when we talk about cause and effect, or is the effect out of the equation?
No, the effect is certainly in the equation, because you set up the causes, but you see, it's not straightforward. Why isn't it straightforward? Because of all the eons of time that we've done those karmic habitual things, over eons of time. And therefore, it's not just a simple, I put a cause in and there's an effect. Sometimes it looks as though that happens, but it really isn't like that. All the conditions, and I'm going to give you these very deep teachings, by the Dalai Lama and by, well, I forget his name. It's a beautiful long name. I'll give it to you just now. But I'm going to give you these very deep teachings of what they say about it. But no, cause and effect remain, but conditions come into the middle and they are absolutely vital. And we can't see them. You know, cause and effect, you can see a lot outwardly, but conditions you can't see so much. Well, all of them, you can't see it outwardly. So it's very, very difficult. Gosh, people are just getting bumped off, hey, with this. It's terrible, honestly, really terrible. You have to get alternative methods for this load shedding. Anyone else want to say anything? Marion, not Mimi, the other Marion. I know you're there, but I can't see you anyway. Lindiwe.
Hi, Mel. I'm on my cell phone. I'm sitting in the dark. Luckily, I could use my router. So when you talk about what we're going to talk about tonight,
yes,
you're basically saying we shouldn't worry about all the relative karma. We must see it's kind of like the omniscient side of it and be in the non-dual state of mind with our talk tonight.
You know what? I am saying that, but it's very, very difficult. Okay.
Yes.
And when I come to give you these teachings, you'll see that what we're doing is we're changing from the essence, from the ground. You're actually changing it through the path into the fruition where we are beyond the causes and conditions. It's a very, very, very difficult thing. And it's very difficult to say to people who are going through long waiting or terrible trauma or loss or pain. It's very difficult for you to say to them, listen, these are causes and conditions you set up, and it would be wonderful if you could really go through these things, because people can't. When they're going through it, their minds are focused and fixated on that. So the whole thing is to be able to find the training, which is what these masters are giving us, the training to go beyond. And that's not easy. Trust me, it's not easy.
Yes.
When you
appearances and the mind, which is the projector. So you start to see the appearances as empty, and therefore you start purifying and you don't react and see them as solid.
Exactly. And that's exactly what the Dalai Lama's teachings is about, that eventually when you can see things in their true state, which is really possible when you do take this pathway, when you see
the more
things,
familiar, yes.
Yeah, they are not, it's not a big deal. That's the whole point, you know. So whatever you're going through, it's not a great big deal.
Ups or downs,
It really doesn't matter. It's how you respond to it, and knowing that you've put those causes and conditions together. Now, Keith Dowman gives a beautiful quote in his book on the Dzogchen view, and he says like this: the nature of mind constitutes the pristine awareness of the here and now. In other words, when you're in a situation, if you're using your human, intellectual, analytical, conceptual mind to deal with that situation, or if you go into the pristine awareness of your nature of mind, of the here and now, he says it's a timeless instant of awareness without cause or condition. An instant of the timeless here and now can't be said to have a cause that precedes this that came before, because then it would be dependent on what came before. And it's not dependent on anything. And likewise, the nature of mind is perfect and complete in itself, just as it is. And it has no causal function. Now, I want you to think about that. So, in other words, what he's saying here is if you can just touch on that pure awareness, even for a moment, in that moment that you touch it, there'll be no more pain and suffering. And then you'll come out of it and there'll be pain and suffering, but you'll go, hey, I want more of that. I want more of that. I want to train in getting there, because there's no causes and conditions. It just is. Now, how do we train ourselves to get there? He says, in pondering, we have to learn to access that. In pondering causes and conditions, what this means is that the relative life that we are living is totally dependent on causes and conditions. But once we enter the true nature of mind, we're no longer subject to these causes and conditions, laws of karma, which result when everything comes into play. I mean, it's actually unbelievable in many, many ways, because you think about it and you actually wonder, well, what are we waiting for? How many lifetimes are we going to go on when we know it? I know that sometimes when I'm going through an unhappy time and I come and sit in my shrine room, and just for a minute, I don't let it go, because if you let it go, then you're letting something go. But I let it be. Letting go is different to letting be, because letting be is, it is what it is. So let it just come up. And in a moment, there's a luminous, awake feeling that feels fresh, even in that time. That's so interesting, because when people go through a terrible time, like for instance, so interesting, when someone knocks on your door and they come to give you bad news, let's say they come to say there's been an accident, you know, someone you love has been killed or something like that. In that first moment, when you get that news, there's a kind of a sense that is completely different to what happens even a half a minute later. It's kind of the part of you that knows, the part of you that is aware, the part of you that can manage, manifests, and then the minute the human mind takes over, we're finished. What do you think of it? What's your opinion of it? How, you know, what are we going to do? I'm hoping that these teachings will give you a lot of clues of how to do it, and exactly what Marian's been saying, like to know what things are made up of, to know how it is just so important. Oh, people are still being bumped off. Damika, I'm so pleased you're here. But everybody's being bumped off tonight with the load shedding. So it's even that circumstance. Here I am, and it's my first night with all of you, and people are just texting me, sorry, I can't get on, I can't get on, I can't get on. What do? Well, we go through with it, and we give the best we can. And then people will catch up, and the circumstances will fade, and the conditions will fade, and we will be back again doing it just as we should. But what do you think about what I'm saying? Tatiana, does it make sense to you? Is it too difficult?
It absolutely does, Mel. But I think you'd need to be in a monastery for a very long time to get
No, that's
near.
That's the exact point.
It's hard.
You know what? It's not. It's just the habit momentum that we have is unbelievable, because we just go back to the same way of dealing with things. We don't want to hear anything new. Okay, we want to, but it seems like too hard work. But you know what? You know, the human mind is too hard work.
Yes.
And do you know how long it took us? I wonder when we were these fresh, beautiful beings right out of the essence, and then we started separating, like Adam and Eve's story and all of that, and we started separating out of, out of that blissful state and everything. I wonder how long it took us to get to this point where we forgot all of that. And now we're so conditioned in this, we say it'll take a monastery and a lifetime of retreat to get this. Isn't it unbelievable? And the bottom line of what you're saying is that's not the truth. The truth is that actually in one instant you could get it because it's already there. The only reason we practice is to try and get the other stuff out of the way so that we can see the light.
Too much stuff.
Yeah. My husband always says to me, sitting here, but he always says to me, and all this practice and all this religion and all this stuff that people do, to get places and everything. He likes to do his own thing, his own stuff, which is absolutely fine. I've got no problem with it. But you see, these masters who've developed the most unbelievable compassion, they have brought forward these Buddhas, techniques and practices that enable us to get back to there. Now, on our own, we don't know how to do it. We really don't know how to do it. That's why we go to these teachers and they say, do this, they point that out, they show you with this, they show you with that, because we don't know how to get there. And so we take the instructions of someone who's actually got there, and we're very happy to take the instructions. You know what I'm saying? So it's a very difficult and very important thing all around. It really is. But I want to teach the deep, insightful teaching of the Dalai Lama from his book, Dzogchen, The Heart Essence of the Great Perfection, and take out of this an intense study of the causes and conditions which he outlines, and he is very precise. He likes to work scientifically, he likes to be absolutely precise. And then the other book that I've taken stuff out of is by a being called Traleg Jamgon. And his study on this subject, he did a translation of a very important book called The Circle of the Sun by Tel Natsuk Rundral. He interpreted it and translated it and taught it. And they both got the most wonderful things on causes and conditions. It's really amazing how much we can learn from it. So let's do a little meditation. We go back to the rainbow, but let's do a little meditation. So get into your meditative posture. Just come to this moment, breathing in and out, and in and out. Coming to this moment, but not holding on to the moment, really not holding on. The past is gone, the future hasn't been made, and the present, just letting it all be. Nothing whatsoever to fixate, hold on to, analyze, just bringing the mind back to the breath, breathing in the freshness of being, breathing out all the staleness of what we've absorbed in the day. In our present perception, everything we see seems to be solid, concrete, stable, and actually existing in its own right. From the viewpoint of our beautiful, awakened mind, all our perceptions of the six senses are as insubstantial as rainbows in the sky. A rainbow originates and appears when all the necessary conditions are present. And if one condition is missing, it will not appear. When all the conditions are there, the rainbow seems to abide as something tangible, when in reality, there is nothing there. A rainbow cannot be located or pinpointed either outside, inside, or anywhere. Nowhere in between. Finally, to where does a rainbow depart or disappear? The answer is nowhere. A rainbow just naturally fades away when the causes and conditions that make it appear are no longer present. In the same way, we say that our thoughts, our feelings, all the things in our life are like rainbows. They appear when all the conditions for their occurrence are present. And when any of these conditions are not present, they naturally disappear, just as rainbows do. So why hold on as though they were really physical and out there? Just let them be. Let them dissolve and disappear into their original essence. So let's go to the Dalai Lama. He obviously starts with the Four Noble Truths, but we're not going to deal with them. I've dealt with them a lot, so we'll just mention them. The truth of suffering, you know, that there is suffering in this world. That was the first noble truth. The second noble truth is there are causes to the suffering, karma and negative emotions. The third noble truth says there is a cessation to suffering. That's such an important one. If you want it to end, there is a place to go where there's no more suffering. There's a cessation. And the fourth one is there's a path, and that path will help you to go to the cessation of suffering. So from these teachings, he talks about the suffering that we don't want, and the happiness that we long for, okay, that we do want, that we really long for. He says those two only arise in dependence upon their causes and conditions. It teaches us the principle of what is called, he says, interdependent origination. So there's your thing. I think you asked, Tatia, or one of you asked, something happens and something else happens. And from that, something else happens. And from that, something else happened. So how we are in this world came about because of what we were like in the previous life, what our motivation was, what karma we made, all of those kind of things brings us to where we are. When we're here, we have feelings, we have cravings, we have attachments. And if we don't go along with them, and if we don't grab and take and fall into the trap again, then we can be free from that wheel of life. If not, we go on the wheel of life to old age, death, suffering, and round again the wheel goes. So it's called interdependent origination. That happens because of that. That happened because of that. You're here because your parents had you. Your parents are there because their parents had them. That's called interdependent origination. He says, happiness, it shows us, comes only as a result of the interaction of causes and conditions. And I wanted to do Thich Nhat Hanh's lovely story of the japonica flower, because it's such a beautiful story. And he says, in my hermitage in France, there's a bush of japonica, Japanese quince. The bush usually blossoms in the spring, but one winter it had been quite warm and the flower buds had come early. During the night, a cold snap arrived and brought with it frost. The next day, while I was doing walking meditation, I noticed that all the buds on the bush had died. I recognized this and thought, this new year we will not have enough flowers to decorate the altar of the Buddha. A few weeks later, the weather became warm again. As I walked in my garden, I saw new buds on the japonica manifesting another generation of flowers. Now, he always spoke to nature. So he said, I asked the japonica flowers, are you the same as the flowers that died in the frost? Or are you different flowers? And now he hears them answering. He says, the flowers replied to me, Tai, we are not the same and we are not different. When conditions are sufficient, we manifest. And when conditions are not sufficient, we go into hiding. It's as simple as that. And he says that's what the Buddha taught. When conditions are sufficient, things manifest. When they're no longer sufficient, things withdraw. They wait until the moment is right for them to manifest again. But what you need to remember is sometimes they might take a whole life to manifest again, or 2, or 3, or 5. And then when they don't manifest, we really get impatience, okay? But he says, at the same time, the suffering can be avoided, but only if we are able to put an end to the causes and conditions that give rise to that. We have to understand this is our responsibility, and we should take the initiative on our own to enable this. What do you think of that? Penny, what do you think of that? Difficult.
I think I would not know where to start, because you have to do your work life, your partnership life, your children, your home, your career, everything. And that is what I think Tatiana is right. You need like sort of a very quiet place where you can sort all of that out.
Okay, but you know what? Is that true? Because You know what, Pammy, I've got a very busy life. Okay, I've really got a pretty busy life. I mean, according to my age, I should actually have my feet up and be staring into space, probably. But you know what? I've got a very busy life. But the theme of my life, you could say, is pondering. Okay, that's the theme of my life, to ponder. So even when I've just been with people and something happens and they're showing me something very unusual or something very strange or something, I always sit for a few minutes and ponder. Okay, now I know when you've got a very busy life and a very busy thing, it's the most unbelievable thing, because how do you find time to ponder? You think you have to go into a monastery, you have to go into a cave, you have to go into somewhere in order to have the time to ponder. No, you can ponder as things happen in your life. You know, I was thinking to myself, it's interesting because my husband lost a very dear friend of his a couple of weeks ago. And now another very dear friend, actually the three of them were very, very friendly at university together. And now another one is going, both of them overseas. And that gets me pondering. It gets me pondering because my generation, I'm a little bit younger than them, but my generation, that generation is leaving. They're dying. They may not die tomorrow, but they're all in the firing line at that stage. We're probably all in the firing line, but they're in the firing line. And what I ponder is this, and this helps me to understand the truth of the causes and conditions. What I ponder is this. I said to my husband tonight when we heard about this friend, I said to him, you know what? Do you realize that when you get to a particular stage of life, and you should start doing it when you're in your 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s, never mind when you're in your 70s or 80s or whatever the case is, but if you are going to die and you haven't a clue about dying, and you haven't a clue about causes and conditions, and you haven't a clue about anything, I mean, it's such a scary thing. And then what happens to you, what must happen to you is, you must miss the period of death where you can wake up to that nature of mind, which none of you are going to miss, because you're going to be pondering it right through your life. So even if you didn't prepare, and even if you didn't do practice, you're going to know that at the moment of death is a very important time to unite with that part that is beyond the river. Now, if you don't, then that wheel, watch a big wheel, watch a big wheel in a fun fair. It just goes on and on and on and on. Okay, then it stops. And if you don't get off that wheel at the bottom, you got to go another round. It stops for a few minutes. If you need to get off, you get off. If you haven't paid, you probably get off. But you go again and again and again. If you don't get out, when the wheel stops, you're just going to go on and on and on with that wheel for the rest of time. You're going to be catapulted into that. Like I said to the wife of this man that we were speaking to overseas tonight, the one that's dying, I said to her, have you spoken to him? She said, no, I've spoken to a psychologist. I said, no, I'm not talking about speaking to a psychologist. I'm talking about, have you spoken to him? No, he's out of it, she says. I said, he may be out of it, but I said, but there is a part of him that can receive whatever you need to say to him now. And it's important that you do. Now, I just look at this. These are people I've known very, very well. And it disturbs me greatly. It makes me even more important to teach people to see this, to go beyond the causes and conditions, because otherwise, if you haven't been a bad person, if you haven't done a Putin and invaded a country and killed millions of innocent people, okay, if you've just been an ordinary person and done the best you can and gone to work and looked after your children and done a few bad things and everything, you're not going to be in big danger, but you're going to be on that wheel. It's going to turn again. Same stuff, different incarnation, same fixations, different time period. How many lives are you prepared to do that? So don't let me ever hear you saying, Pam, like you say to me often, yeah, but I'm not like you. And, you know, I've got to work and I've got to support my daughter and I've got to do this and I've got to do that. We've all got our causes and conditions. We've all got our effects. But we need to find the gap to be able to really look deeply into this. And it's so important. And when I watch people who die totally, they might be brilliant people academically, they might be brilliant in their earthly life, but they haven't a clue. I cry a lot and I talk a lot to them because I really, really feel to myself that it's such a sad thing that one can spend maybe 80 years, 90 years, 75 years, whatever, on this earth plane and not even touch that part once. Jean, I'm very happy you came in. People are coming in and bumping off and coming in and bumping off the whole night. So what have you got to say to that, Pammy? No, I don't care if you do your practice in 1 minute when you go to the toilet. I don't care if you do your practice for 2 minutes when you're going to, before you go to sleep at night. I don't care if you look out of the window at work and you do 5 minutes of meditation. That's fine, but keep going. Stop saying, I can't and I need to take off the rest of my life. No ways. You've got to do it now. Okay. Anyone want to say anything?
Just to finish what we started, I think self-awareness is a very important part of that, because if you practice your self-awareness, it's almost like psychological analysis, but it's you being very deeply in touch with yourself, and that allows you to grow that gift so that you can be growing that awareness that then flows into your relationships with other people and understanding them better. And it grows from there into the things that you're talking about. Am I right?
Okay, but what does self-awareness mean? What does looking at self mean? This is so important because you brought up a very interesting thing. And basically you're right, except for that one word. Okay.
It's the awareness that's important.
Yeah, you see, self.
You've got to have a starting point.
No, if you look at self, when self is used in the human terminology, it means me, Melanie, myself. We'll come to it. The Dalai Lama deals with it. We'll come to it in this teaching. Okay. It means me, myself. In the higher teachings, self-awareness means aware by itself. Now, there's a very big difference between self-liberation means it liberates of itself rather than it liberates you yourself, because you yourself is nothing. You're just a series of consciousnesses going through your life. Do you understand what I'm saying? So what you're saying is 100% correct. But just be careful with your word self-awareness, because You can't analyze me, because if you're analyzing me, you're already in the thick of the causes and conditions. Okay?
So would you say analyzing your consciousness, analyzing your energy, analyzing your spark of the universe?
You see, all of that assists you. But I would, if I were being truthful with you, I would say, take the analyzing and put it in the dirt box, even though I'm telling you it's good.
I
Okay?
can't.
No, it's not. Because what I'm trying to say is so beautiful, because in a moment of awakening, so interesting, there's no analysis. It's just a sense of luminous clarity. It can be for a second when we start doing it. When you listen to this Dalai Lama teaching, he teaches from a sense of luminosity. I've got a picture of him there looking at me, okay? But he teaches from a sense of luminosity and clarity. He never teaches from a sense of me, myself, analyzing things, but he still gives it with total clarity. You'll see when I read you his stuff, he still gives it at the level that we can understand it. That's his duty, to give it to us that we can understand it. But you see, when we do too much analysis, then it makes it a little bit complicated. But when I say pondering, it's a little lighter than analysis. Because analysis is when you go like, why is this like this? And how did this get to be like this? And what does the wheel mean? And how come I was in this and this and this? That's analysis. Okay. Pondering is, I was on the wheel today. Leave it. It meanders in the air, and then it comes back to you with an insight. It's very different. And you see, our minds are trained in analysis, and it spoils that freshness, that fresh openness that we need to have. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Oh boy, do I feel stale.
No, don't feel stale. Feel refreshed. Feel refreshed now, this minute, and listen carefully to what the Dalai Lama says. He asks, what is the true meaning of impermanence? Now, if you want to write something down, write that word down, impermanence, because he asks, what is the true meaning of impermanence? And it is that any phenomenon that depends for its origination, in other words, anything that comes about based on causes and conditions that give rise to its existence. So in other words, anything over there that has got causes and conditions, now listen to what he says, are also the causes for its disintegration and cessation. Can I read that again to you? Now just think about it. Impermanence is that anything out there, if this book, or you who is out there from me, if I want to say it, if you come about because of causes and condition, in other words, your existence comes about because of causes and conditions, those are also the causes for the disintegration and cessation of whatever we're looking at. So in other words, if a feeling came about, let's say you were really angry. It's very interesting, this. Let's say you were really angry. You were angry because a friend let you down. Now, if we went into all the causes and conditions, that friend let you down because her boyfriend broke up with her last week. Okay, her boyfriend broke up with her because he'd had enough of her, or because he found somebody else. You can go back. But if you look deeply at the causes and conditions, they're the same causes that can just let it be, and it'll disintegrate of its own occurrence. So if you've got the feeling of anger coming up because of this, because of that, and if you look at that anger, because it came about impermanently like that, it can dissolve in 1 second if you just let it free. The minute you go in and you say, now, I'm angry because of this, and this is what I'm going to do, and tomorrow I'm going to get her back, and now I'm going to do this, okay? You're just giving rise to more and more and more. But those same things that brought it into existence will cause it to disintegrate as well. Isn't that fascinating? He says all these phenomena are momentary in the sense that they all go through a process of change moment by moment, and they do not require secondary conditions for their disintegration. The very fact that the causes and conditions which produce them are adequate causes and conditions for their disintegration shows that these phenomena must be by nature momentary and impermanent. Because there's my anger. At the moment, it looks like a fiery thing. And when I let it be, it just disintegrates in the same way. It was only momentary. It was only brought about by causes and conditions, and those causes and conditions disintegrated. So he says, phenomena which are subject to change and are dependent on causes and conditions for their existence are called other-powered, in the sense that they're under the power and control of their causes. Now, this is the crux of it. When we search hard for the causes of suffering, which is noble truth too, we find the truth of how those causes came into being, the origin of suffering. That's karma and negative emotions. Now look even deeper, and we find that the cause alone is not sufficient for bringing about the result. Causes themselves have to come into contact with cooperative circumstances or conditions for them to manifest. In other words, it's not just, I give you a biff, you give me a biff back. I give you an apple tree seed, you get apples. No. First, you've got to plant them, have the right soil, have the water, have the person to put them, and then you might get an apple tree. But what does all of this mean? Damika, Jean-Francois, all of you, tell me what you feel. Because if you know this, then it makes such a difference. Because nothing over there is tangible. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is without causes and conditions. So why are we so worried about it? Fiona, you've been very quiet.
Sorry, Mel. I'm just trying to preserve my battery power on my laptop. Yeah, I, you know, conceptually, it's easy to like understand it, but in practice, I find myself being sucked in to things and concretizing things so easily. I mean, even though I know it really is, in the great scheme of things, something momentary, something that's going to disintegrate and dissolve. Especially lately, I've been absorbed into things that I get annoyed with myself for it, because I think, but you know, this is temporary. You know that this is, you know, this is something that you have, by whatever means, brought upon yourself. And you know, so it can be quite frustrating. But I think you're right, Mel. It does help to think, well, you know, if I just let it be, it may not always work, but if I just let this be, it does, and it does actually dissolve of its own accord. But my brain is like, it keeps picking.
Yeah, why do we go and pick it up again?
I don't know. I have no idea. And I know, even as I'm picking it up again, Mel, that I'm doing exactly the same thing again. I suppose it helps that I'm aware that I'm doing that, but it doesn't seem to help to stop it in some instances. I keep going back to it, even though I know I shouldn't be going back to it, you know?
And you see, don't you all see that when you're having a hard time with somebody, okay, and you're pondering, Pammy, you're pondering having a hard time with somebody, okay? And in one moment, it's so interesting because in one moment, you're thinking, look what they did to me. How's this? I don't have to take this. Look at how this person's behaving towards me. But when you change this, you suddenly look inwards and you suddenly say, what am I seeing in this? What is being shown to me? How can I change these conditions, these causes, these effects? How can I change? Instead of going there, you go there. And that's how you change it, because you see everything in your life is temporary, transient, impermanent. It's going to change. It's subject to causes and conditions. And so you have a completely different attitude because you don't go back to pick it up, and you definitely don't feel sorry for yourself. Now, the Dalai Lama says, for example, if we take a plant, let's say we take this plant, and now we say, what's the material cause for this plant? How did it come about? We find it has continuity back into beginningless time. Some Buddhist texts speak of space particles existing before the evolution of this present universe. And according to these texts, these space particles serve as the material and substantial cause for matter, such as the plant. So he says that they go back and they say there were first space particles. Then the space particles formed into the plant. Okay, now he asks if the essential and substantial cause for matter is traced to these space particles, which are all the same, then how do we account for the diversity that we see in the material world? If they're all the same and they all come from the space particles, how did they get to be all different? How come everything doesn't look the same? It all looks completely different. And he says, here is where the question of conditions and circumstances come into play. When these substantial causes come into contact with different circumstances and conditions, they give rise to different effects. So for different kinds of matter, cause alone is not enough. You need all the different circumstances to come together. Now think about this and what it means. It means if you are in a lousy situation, let's say your boss shouted at you. Let's say someone at work didn't really treat you well. It's only your feelings, your response, your thoughts, your everything, which is the cause of this being a very, very unhappy situation. If you didn't have those feelings, what would happen is if somebody said, I don't like your work, you wouldn't go into a stupor. And why did they do that? Because my mother never liked anything I did before, and now my boss doesn't like it, and we make a whole big story. But meanwhile, if the person came and said, I don't really like your work, if we traced it back to the space particle, It's only your feelings that cause it to be a catastrophe. Somebody else might just let it roll over their head and not even take any notice of it. And then it would dissolve and it would go back to where it came from in the first place. Mimi, you shaking, you nodding your head. What do you think about that? How come some people see a particular person as divine and friendly, and other people will come and tell you they're as cold as ice?
It is. It's exactly like that. As you're saying, it's not the situation. It's your thoughts that make you suffer. And thinking, as Shakespeare, whoever said, thinking makes it so, because it's what you think about it. It's not the actual situation. And just everything you've said tonight, I think, is very inspiring and very thought-provoking, because whatever, if we've created it, we must know how to dissolve it.
And we don't have to know how to dissolve it, because those same causes and conditions will dissolve it of its own accord if you don't interfere.
The whole
The
thing.
universe has got the most beautiful way of things coming into being and then things disintegrating. Even universes disintegrate in time. We interfere. We interfere in the process with our thoughts, our feelings, our causes. I mean, it's just unbelievably says. So what happens is we find it's principally our own feelings, our own thoughts, our emotions that really determine whether we're going to suffer or be happy. How do we change that? None.
Well, as you once said, if you keep picking it up, you've got to, I try to give a little bit of thought to the situation. And then once I'm picking it up, I see it straight away, and I straight away start to concentrate elsewhere. Otherwise, it will keep picking up. And then eventually it does. It dissolves on its own.
And you see, this teaching comes to an end when he's talking about, he says, is it possible then to put an end to all suffering? I won't go into any more because it's late, but is it possible to put an end to all suffering? Viam, you're also very quiet. What do you think? I can see you very hot. So am I. It's supposed to be a cooler day.
But see all you guys. Yeah, I'm just thinking about all this stuff. I'm reading a great book. Actually, it's actually my teacher. And I'm thinking about that, like, just like the impossible is possible, you know. Some of the people that I mentioned, that some things are so maybe so challenging, or it looks so challenging at a certain time. I remember that I never thought that I'd find a teacher, you know, and now I have a teacher who's like a Rinpoche from Tibet, and he's got 3 Chimpo degrees. He's an amazing teacher. When he opens his mouth, I just fall flat on my face. You know, it's just like really, like, even his book, it feels like he's speaking directly to me. But it just makes me think that it is difficult, you know, because before I was trying to figure it out on myself, doing this practice, and then I'm trying to do non-dro, and then I bombed out with non-dro because I wasn't doing it. Now I'm like, just like slowly doing just what he's telling me, you know, following the thing. And like in this book, when it talks about, you know, and pretty much what you've spoken about a lot this evening about emptiness, you know, contemplating emptiness. And I think there's no object and there's no perceiver, and it's all samsara, nirvana is the same thing. It's all linked together. I don't think linked is the right word, but you know what I'm saying. But I think if we contemplate that more, you know, that what you said, that luminous clarity is the true essence of our beings. You know, there is no perceiver, there's no object, there's only luminous clarity, and that's all that there is. Just restful in that state. Then we can take that into our day when we start obsessing about something or this object or this person, and then just like stop. It's like there's nothing there. Just take a break, you know. And then maybe you see it a bit late. Then I can be kind of compassionate towards myself and say, okay, I didn't catch it in time, but now I don't have to harp about it and like judge myself and say like, oh, poor me, I'm not doing it right. I can just like take it from there, you know. Yeah. There's nothing to achieve, and there's no failure. There's nothing to gain.
Talk to Pam, please. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree wholeheartedly. You see, you've got to just stop that process of that human part of the intellectual mind destroying the freshness. There's actually nothing. You could walk in nature and just have one moment of seeing a plant and just awaken in that moment. And what you're saying is, because up until now this guy is saying, take a chill pill, just enjoy your life, get yourself free. I mean, when you begin to understand, and it is not a complicated process, Tatiana, it's only complex to allow what we've done up to now to disintegrate. That's what's complex, not the waking up, because the waking up was always there. When you get a fright, you go, and in that moment of getting a fright, you distracted from your human part of your mind. And that's a bit of awakening. But for all of you, we'll end, but to actually say to all of you that what the Dalai Lama is doing in a very scientific way, he's saying that whatever you think is out there that is caused by conditions and causes and conditions, those same causes and conditions, which are all come from the essence, can dissolve it all. So stop catching a freak out about everything. Just let things play out. That word play out is vital. Instead of going, picking it up, analyzing it, working it out, feeling sorry for yourself and everything, as soon as you pick it up, drop it and watch it disintegrate. It really does. So I want to go on with this next time. I'll give you a little summary, but what the next step is that he comes on what you deduce from all of this. And that's what we'll do next time, because he says the principal cause, whether we experience happiness or suffering, lies within. Not there, within. Such an important point. What we think about it, what we feel about it, causes all the disruption, and that's what spoils it. And we have to find a way of being absolutely quiet and still, even if it is for 20 seconds, in which that beautiful awareness can manifest itself. So let's ponder on that, and then we'll come back to this next time. I'll give you a few more stories and a few more examples, because I think it's really important. And I think this teaching is so important because, it's about our lives. It's about what we're doing every day. It's about the point of it. And I think it's really important. But let's dedicate for all suffering sentient beings. May they really, really, really know that suffering is intangible. It can disintegrate just the way it came into being, and that nothing is permanent and that nothing is separate from our inner being. May all sentient beings realize this. Through this merit, may we achieve all-seeing Buddhahood, and thereafter, once all harmful enemies have been defeated, may all beings be liberated from the ocean of existence, stirred by the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. Sonam die tamche zipane topne nepe dranam kamshene jegana chi bala dropaye sipe sole doa warsho. What? What's happened? Something's happened. right at the end.
We can still hear you, Mel.
Can you? Can you?
Yes. Your image is frozen, but I can hear you.
It's so amazing. I don't know what to do. Can you stop the recording, Fee?